Welcome to Collector's Corner, the premier digital art platform.
We help collectors gain and maintain their edge, all while appreciating beautiful art.
Let's jump in. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Collector's Corner. My name is P. I am one of your hosts. I'm joined by my friend Jared, my co-host, and of the 8NAP Fund. And I'm going to introduce our guest really fast, and then throw it over to Jared, and then throw it over to you, Daniel. We're crazy excited. We have the fantastic, the nicest person in Gen Art. Sorry to all the other nice people, but I'm claiming you this. We have Daniel Calderon-Arenas with us here today, who is many things, and we'll get to that. But let me quickly hop over to you, Jared. How are you doing today?
Doing good. Just been crazy busy trying to get the foundation and all the right protocols in place for the fund. So just all that monotonous stuff, not trading, not buying, just building and trying to execute, my man.
Same here. We are building here at Collector's Corner, and that's why we are so excited to have you here with us today, Daniel. And I'm going to do a little quick mini intro. So Daniel is a generative artist. He has I should know this, the very first Artblocks long form collection, Genesis, that he created. In addition to that, he has 2 more Artblocks playgrounds, and then 3 more collections that we're going to cover. Bosque de Chapultepec, can I say it correctly? I'm sorry. Marfa Yucca, and Really Random Rock, which are all super cool. So rather than doing a deep dive into one of your collections, we wanted to cover a lot of them. And also, for folks who may not know, Daniel is Erick Snowfro Calderon's brother, which puts him in a really interesting perspective on the industry, how it's evolved, and where it might be going. So looking forward to hearing all of that as well. How are you today, Daniel?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here, excited to talk about art, about some projects, about anything really. So yeah.
Oh man, we're so excited too. And I got to tell folks, I'm sorry if I might embarrass you a little bit, but Daniel is amazing. So I was hanging out with my friend 0x Cosmo, who, we were hanging out in Mexico City a week before. I believe he had just met you, and you guys were like fast friends, and we were hanging out at the Bright Moments event. You let everybody come and sit with your mint. It was so cool. It was such a nice experience, such a nice space. It felt like being in a park, and it just, it's one of the things I love about the space. But people like you who are so talented yet approachable, kind, just like great humans. So I thank you for coming. Thank you for being willing to share this with the audience. And yeah, I guess I'll just jump right in. You do so many things. You're a generative artist, a teacher. How did you get into coding and art in the first place?
Oh man, okay. So, well, to begin with, my grandfather was a painter. In the 80s, he lived in Mexico City, and he was painting just oil paints using a knife. Like there's like a technique called knife painting, and something he learned in Paris actually when he was younger. He visited Paris and met some street artists there, and they sort of taught him these like street art techniques and whatnot. And so he came back to Mexico City and started painting. And I think that's what sort of like put art into like our family, I think, because he literally was like sort of like a bohemian type of artist that traveled around and just kind of lived off of the paintings that he would sell. So growing up, I was surrounded by those works. They were on the walls of my parents' house. But when I go to my uncle's house, he would have paintings there too. And when I go to Mexico and visit family, like I would see his paintings there too. And so like his paintings were everywhere, and they're very, very particular. Like they have a very particular style, very identifiable. And I think they made an impression on me. I think they made an impression on everyone in our family, including my father, who, he's kind of like the opposite of art or of artist. He's a businessman. And but just like growing up, we had that, and I think that sort of subconsciously plays a role in while I became an artist. I started just drawing as a young kid, just in sketchbooks and whatnot. And then just later on, I always wanted to go to art school. My parents didn't really want me to go to art school. So I studied economics in college, got a degree in economics. And then when I realized that all I could do really with that is work at a bank, I thought, okay, no, I'm going back to study art. So I went and studied sculpture in undergrad. I went and got my master's degree in sculpture. So that's kind of how I got into art. And I've always kind of dabbled with stuff. I've painted. I made when I was younger, hanging out with friends and stuff. I'd make my own canvases, stretch them, and gesso them, and paint just wild, wacky shit on them. We played with spray paint and stuff, just kind of messing around with art, but never really took it seriously until I studied it in school and decided to make a career out of it. So like during that time, there's a lot going on with computers. I knew how to code my own websites, just HTML, CSS, PHP type stuff, but never really did much with that. I found interest in Arduinos. Like Arduinos were a thing about 15, maybe like 15 to 20 years ago. I can't even, my dates are probably wrong, but 2007, 2008 or so, I was playing with Arduinos and just learned to code through that. Like I learned through like the Arduino IDE how to control LED lights and make them change colors. And I started playing with like little wooden boxes and making lamps out of them with like rice paper and like LEDs inside and like kind of making gradients between them. And that was like so long ago, and I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just kind of messing around, in my bedroom, like playing with stuff. And then connecting processing to Arduino was a thing, right? So like, how do I control these LED lights using like an interface on my computer? So I learned processing like at that time, and just kind of barely dabbled with it. It probably wasn't like until 4 or 5 years later, I started like kind of getting into just like the thought of, oh, maybe I could make my own game, like using code or whatever. So I started playing with like some just out of the box like packages like Stencil. There's this thing called Stencil. It's basically like it's like Scratch, like user interface, like click and drag blocks together to build like code, I guess, little algorithms, and it's really designed for making games. So I spent like a year just messing around with that. I made some funky little games and whatnot. And then at that time, that's like when the shitcoin era was happening. So that was like 2017 or so. And then like very soon after that, I realized that there's more to processing than I knew before. And everything I learned with these drag and drop interface sort of coding environments, like that was basically just like coding, just written out code. And so I quickly made the connection between like what a loop was in a Scratch like environment to like what a loop was like written out in JavaScript or Java. So I picked up processing a lot better, and when I returned to it, and I started messing around, and I finally wrapped my mind around object-oriented programming type approaches, and so like started playing with that. And before I knew it, I was like, okay, well, I can definitely make interesting kind of visual things with this, and that led to just like the very precursor to the Genesis project. That's how I got into coding. It's I never studied computer science. I didn't go any academic route to that. I just learned from YouTube videos, learned from like forums and asking questions and just reading like other people's responses and just kind of, like bumping into walls all the time and being like, well, how am I going to solve this? Right. And spending 3 hours solving a really simple problem.
I
Like,
think that's really cool that, your experience, while having a deeply vested interest in art, I love the analogy of bumping off of walls. We, we're part of Grailers, which is a Gen Art Discord group, but there's a couple aspiring artists there who, there's a ton of artists already, but also I'll call it collectors who are, really, from my perspective, starting to see a similar journey where they're dabbling and bumping off walls, and it's really starting to get their, what I will call sea legs underneath them. And I think it's, it's cool to reflect on, we are almost actually the 2-year anniversary of Artblocks, 2 years after your initial release, which we'll get into. And it feels like you're so established, and yet to have that little bit of vulnerability allows others to see that, with some persistence and dedication to the craft, like really amazing things are possible. Now, obviously, your first drop was on, Artblocks Day Zero, which is amazing from a historical perspective. what gave you the conviction ultimately to pivot your art from, we talked off camera, spray paints and, coding
Mhm.
to really this digital NFT space?
Oh, that's a good question. You know, I studied sculpture, so I'm used to working with traditional materials, plaster and wood, something totally non-digital. Like even in college when I was getting my degree, like professors there would be like, well, we're not really interested in computers as much. Like we want to know what computers can't do, like what you can do with your hands. Like there wasn't like a lot of support for like the digital, at least at the university that I was at. And so I just felt like my interests were already in the digital space. So like I think the pivot was rather easy for me because art blocks sort of happened and a lot of my attention just immediately turned to that. Like how do I put my best like in this format? Like how do I take all my energy that's being wasted in other areas and how do I bring it all into like this digital sort of realm where the action is, where the collectors are, where the appreciation is, where where things are happening, like like history, I guess you could say, is being made. Like so for me it was pretty much a no-brainer. Like I can continue playing with plaster and wood, and I still do. Like I still make physical objects every now and then. I do a lot of mold making, like, and also a lot of 3D printing and digital fabrication type stuff. I teach those courses at the University of Houston, but at the same time, like I think the magic is happening in code, and it's happening, making algorithms to produce generative editions. Like that's really where it's at. And not only is that like an exciting place because of all the collectorship and all of the activity around it, but there's also like something like in I think inside of me and other artists that I feel like this is a very pure form of expression. Like if you look at the history of art, like artists over the past hundreds of years have been expressing in iterative formats. I mean, take any famous artist today is basically making variations of their particular style of art that have very very small variations between each painting, and that's basically they're iterating, but they're doing it at a very slow pace because traditional art does it very slow, right? The magic here is that we can, as artists, we can still work under the same mental stream, but we can do it in a super accelerated pace. We can literally preview something with in every possible color, by clicking one button, right? You click a button and you get 1,000 outputs that are all variations with just slight color differences. Imagine trying to do that physically. And for me, like working with plaster and sculpture and things like that, like it might take me, like a couple of days to sculpt a nose on a portrait. And if I want to change like the size of the nostrils or something, right? I have to like chip away stuff and I have to rebuild it. It's like just a tiny little change in a physical artwork could take days, whereas like 10,000 changes on a digital artwork can be done in less than a second, right? So like the iterability and like the ability to explore using generative art is like just it's like hyperspeed. And I think that's where the excitement is for me, like as an artist, is like I want to be able to explore and I want to navigate this space and see what's in it. And so like for me that pivot was really like a no-brainer. Like I have to kind of explore more of this right now, especially because the support is there, there's the artist community is there. Like there's artists all around now. They're all in Discord. They're all just like one message away, like one private message away, and everyone's so open, and that just wasn't around in the traditional space as much. Like we're in the traditional space, like artists are a little bit more, I don't know, you could say that they're more protective of their ideas, and they're a little bit jealous of each other, and like the opportunities are very few and far between, and so it's highly competitive, and there's like a lack of trust that if you share your ideas with another sculptor or another painter, they're going to steal those ideas and they're going to capitalize on them and run with them. And yeah, sure, that can happen in like the digital space too, but the playing field is so ample here, like it's so wide that it's okay if that happens because there's so much more to explore.
that definitely resonates with me, and we felt similarly when thinking about Collector's Corner. Is that this is an exciting space. The caliber of people is fantastic. The culture is really supportive and helpful and open, and it feels like there's just so many things that need to be built out for this world that has touched us that we want to go and contribute. It's like, okay, let's hop in. There's so many things that can be done. And so I completely agree and resonate, especially me coming not from an art background at all, or really a podcasting background at all. But I, you know, what what was it like back then? I have to ask you because when you were about to launch Genesis, or maybe when you decided that you were going to do it, I'm sure, of course, Eric like nudged you towards it, but was it already obvious by then that this was going to be a thing? And if so, when did it kind of click for you? You made that decision. Okay, I'm going to just focus on this, at least see where it goes.
Well, it definitely was not obvious. Eric had the idea for Artblocks, I would say like 2 years prior. And back then, everything was so new, really hard to understand just because like I didn't understand what NFTs were, like I hardly knew what MetaMask was or how to interact with things. Like crypto kitties were like my first entry into this whole space. And
Did
it
you
was
get a
still,
kitty?
oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I got a whole bunch of them, but they've been sitting in my wallet, ever since, and I've never like really bred them too much. But like the things were still confusing back there. But back then, what gas was, and like gas was expensive as hell, and just like it was just a different kind of space. And so Eric was like he had a meeting with myself and Pixel Pete and another friend of ours, Matthew Wettergreen. We all met at a bar one night, and he like sort of introduced us to this idea. He's like, this thing called Art Blocks, and we want to do this and I want to do that, and it's sort of like a platform. And but like we didn't really understand. We're like, this sounds really cool, but like it's hard to like wrap our mind around it. And so but at that time, like I kind of understood one basic element here, which was that using a token hash string, or in this case, it was the block hash. So like every Ethereum block has like a unique identifier, like a hash string to it. And using a unique hash string, one can produce a unique work of art from it, right? By interpreting that hash string, in different ways. So for example, if the first letter of the hash string is an A, then the composition might be red. If the first letter is C, the composition might be blue, right? And so like there's 64 characters in a hash string, and there's 16 possible variations of what that character can be. So that produces a ton of possible like configurations that a composition can have, right? And so like the idea from the get-go for me was like, okay, a hash string can be converted into a work of art. So after that meeting, we had talked about, during that meeting, we talked about like, well, we need some way to kind of like explore this and like a proof of concept. And so like Genesis was used for that. So like in 2018, we used Genesis to sort of explore how, like, what does this look like on the contract side? Like, what did this look like on the interface side, right? And a lot of that was just Eric working with other like people that were really savvy with programming, right? Like my role was really just, hey, can you like kind of tweak your Genesis project to make it work for these, for this hash string sort of like approach. And I was able to do that. And so the project sort of was operating, on the back end of like, testing for testing purposes. And for the next 2 years, it was basically doing that. And I think at one point in 2019, by the way, it's all like the end of 2017, early 2018. And I think in 2019, we had like a Telegram channel, and we were all chatting in there. And there was like one moment where Rick was like, all right, I need everybody to send a, like an Ethereum payment to this address, right? And so like we went around and each sent an address, a payment to that address. I think it was like 0.001 Ethereum or something, right? Actually, it wasn't even Ethereum. It was a special token that Eric had created called DART, Decentralized Art Token. And so we're using that to test it. And so we went around the table and kind of like, the virtual table, because this is all on just online. And we each sent a payment to this contract, and on all of our screens at the same time, a Genesis mint would appear, right? And so then we were checking, we're like, all right, well, everybody posts the image you see, and we all posted the image, and it was all the same image, right? So meaning that like we were all synced up, and it was working. And and we did that with a couple different mints, and so like there were moments like that where like kind of like it all kind of started coming together. But I would say like even at that point it was still nebulous, like in my mind. Like I just knew that, hey, there's my project and Erick's doing something really awesome with it. I just got to like interact with this contract, and like I get to see what I mint, and then I could see what everybody else mints. And like it was a different system. Like I would just leave my screen on, and then when like say Pixel Pete would send a payment, then my screen would automatically like switch to his mint, and it would only exist for like I don't know 2 minutes or something, like until the next block, Ethereum block would mint, right? And so then it was like this constantly changing screen of outputs that would be streaming into your device, right? CryptoKitties kind of did something similar. I think they work with the hash strings too. Mentality of using a hash string, we can generate unique works of art, right? And CryptoKitties kind of did something similar. I think they work with the hash strings too.
Did you all have the concept of, you don't know what you're going to get, even if the hash string? I guess the hash string does introduce that randomness of the output itself. And then did you decide to make it a larger collection size to allow for that to really manifest and get like the variety of the collection?
I think, well, let's just say like, okay, so that was 2019. Fast forward a whole like year and a half later, it's November, and it's about when Artblocks was about to launch, right? And this is like now COVID time, and Erick had the time like in his schedule to like sit down and like actually put together the whole project vision, like the way he envisioned it, like with the developers. And at this time I'm sort of like on the outside just working on my degree and like finishing up school and like just figuring out life, I guess you could say. But Erick sort of came to me like I would say like a couple of weeks before and was like, hey, this Artblocks project I'm working on, like it's really like it's actually gonna, like I'm actually doing this. And I was like, okay, well. And he was like, can you set up your Genesis project to like can you convert it to like this particular format so that it works for I can upload it to the blockchain and whatnot. And I did that, and I kind of like I've been staring at this project for like 2 years now, and I'm just like, this is a cool project, but nothing's happening with it. I don't know what's like. I was thinking maybe I can take just outputs from this and like commercialize the outputs somehow, like it's unrelated to blockchain, or maybe they could be some sort of like painting that I paint. Like I was confused as to what the project was going to do if it didn't do anything with the blockchain. But luckily, Erick came through and was like, "Hey, okay, we're going to do this. It's going to launch in a couple of weeks. Like here's what you need to do to get it set up." And he showed me like basically how to operate MetaMask and interact with the Artblocks smart contract and upload stuff there and all that kind of stuff. And then like a couple days later it went live. And in terms of the edition size, like I didn't know what was like a good edition size, so like we went with 512 because it's kind of like a power of two, and it's like a good middle ground. And I thought there's no way that 10 of these are going to be purchased, much less 500 of them, right? Because I was used to like Web 2 like world where you put stuff online and like nothing ever comes.
You're worried about whether or not selling 500, and now you have a collection whose floor is 9.35 ETH. How crazy is that? I mean, we'll get into it, but I mean, I'm staring at OpenSea right now, and it's like, it's got to be absolutely mind-blowing for you and kind of surreal to just think 2 years ago you're like, holy shit, like just 10 I'll be happy, and now 10 is the magic number because it's the 10th floor, right? But with that being said, I'm staring at all 6 of your collections, and on one of my huge screens here, and it's one of the things I wanted to ask you about your art in particular is, do you feel like there's a common theme amongst all of your art that you'd be willing to share with the greater community? And part B of this would be, if you feel comfortable letting anything out, is there anything that you're working on that we can, look forward to?
Yeah, just like in terms of the collections together, I would say that like my first three projects on Artblocks are sort of like getting my feet wet, right? Like I'm wrapping my mind around generative art. I'm wrapping my mind around like the reality of art blocks and the reality of like the NFT space. And I'm coming from a background that's traditional art where like conceptual nature is sort of valued more than like the visual, look of a thing. And so like I'm thinking at that, during these first three projects, I'm sort of still thinking in like that, like how can I add like a conceptual element to this work, but at the same time like I'm working with color, right? I'm working with shapes, and I'm working with like the things that come out of the box with P5, right? Like circles and squares and color fills and strokes and maybe some movement and some animation, right? So like the beginning, like my projects are sort of exploring that. There's exploring iteration and the possibilities of like how much can I get out of an algorithm. The Gen 2 project is probably one of my favorites because it's small edition, but also because it plays with just color and form, and it's about surprise, I guess, in a way. Like you have these two like curtains that sort of open up and reveal this shape that's kind of been, I guess you could say, smoothed out along a particular type of curve.
Yeah, and for those listening on audio only, I just put it up here on the screen on Sansa.xyz. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, Daniel, but please
Oh
keep
no,
going.
totally. So like at this time, really, what I'm doing is I'm exploring iteration. I'm seeing what it takes for me to like create something unique. It's different from like everything else I'm seeing. Something that kind of is that can contain variety, whereas variety with, I guess, like a thread of consistency. There's like a fine balance between like what obviously there's like 100 opinions about what a generative project should be, but in my eyes, in my experience, what I seek is a project that has variety but also a certain like thread of consistency. So like I'm exploring these kinds of ideas like with those first three projects. And then what happened is that I connected with Matt Jacobson from Plottables, and he's doing this, he's creating this platform that is basically generative art for plotting purposes, which means that you make a work of art and then the collector can send that work of art to a plotting device, which is like a CNC type axis device that takes a pen and draws it on a sheet of paper. And so I started learning about that, and I thought like, well, what do I need to create a project that can operate in this way? And oh, since you're on that website there, if you click on gallery, top left corner, and you can kind of scroll through all the different projects that have been coming out of this platform, which they're all just really incredible. But the idea is that, well, now I have to think about generative art in a completely different way. And this is sort of like it adds a new set of constraints. Like, you can only do so much with a pen, and you can only do so much with a pen plotter. And you don't want to generate something that can't be plotted on a platform like this. And so what that means is I have to rethink my code. I have to think my approach. Instead of working with just shapes and triangles and squares, I now have to think about points. I have to think about points and lines. So if I want to make a square, I have to literally figure out a way to position these points for a square at their proper positions. And what that means is that like now I'm working at a more granular level, and once I get down to the level of points and lines, well, like the sort of game changes. Instead of thinking, well, how can I make something incredibly colorful and beautiful, my mind starts thinking, well, how can I take these lines and drive them in certain ways to create shapes? And how can I take these shapes and convert them into something recognizable or relatable? And so what I end up doing is creating these rocks, and a project's called Really Random Rock. And it basically starts with a point and starts generating lines and shapes from this one point into these rock shapes, and then adds shading and color and whatnot, and all of it's plottable. And so like from that point onwards, like in my work, like my practice, I'm thinking, holy shit, there's so much more to generative art once you get down to the level of points and lines, because that means I can start thinking about representation. And just it's like a tool, like thinking about points. Generative art with points and lines is like thinking about drawing, with through the lens of graphite, like what is graphite on a sheet of paper, as opposed to what is drawing, like sketching with a pencil, right? Like you can do so much with graphite if you think about it like that. If you're just stuck with a pencil, there's only like so many lines you can make, right? So like thinking about it more granularly, like opened up my whole mind to like what generative art can do. And so from there, from that point onwards, I've kind of like gravitated towards this realm of representation. And so like Marfa Yucca was my next project, and like now I'm literally traveling through West Texas. I spent a month there over the summer, and I was really lucky because I got to be there like the moment that all the cacti and all the succulents and everything were flowering, and like there was literally fields of yuccas.
Is that like the cherry blossom season in Japan, but for yuccas?
Oh yeah, totally. And it's only for like a week and a half or so that the yuccas actually flower, and then the flowers die. But they all flower in tandem, and it was just like a sight to behold, I guess. I don't know. Apparently, it doesn't happen every year, and so I was just there at the right place at the right time, and it left an impression on me. And so I thought, okay, well, what if I like express this somehow? Like, what if I bring this, like the beauty of these yuccas into a generative art project? And so like the skills I learned from plottables, I'm applying to these next projects, and I'm learning throughout this whole process that there's a whole avenue of exploration that's ripe with with content, which is generative art with the aim of representational like elements. So that's kind of like you can kind of see this kind of happening in my work, because early on I'm playing with shapes and color, and now I'm playing with representation, and now I'm playing with like color and form and representing actual locations. Marfa Yucca is like about an actual plant, and then if you go to Bosque de Chapultepec, like this is an actual place that exists, and I can experience that place, and I can take my experience and internalize it, and I can take that experience and like sort of find an expression through generative art to where I can share it with the world. And I can not only share it with the world, but I'm also like making people aware of the existence of a particular place in our real life. And so like there's a value there, and I really love that. And so like I guess you could say that my work has sort of gone that route. And moving forward, obviously I'm pretty much committed to exploring this further. But projects in the future are definitely going to kind of take this and continue with it, because there's not a lot of people exploring this kind of thing in generative art, and there's a lot of generative artists out there, but there's actually like a hurdle to getting into a place where you can get representational with things. And so for me, plottables and really diving deep into like how that works helps me find the tools within myself to overcome that hurdle, right? And so now that I'm over that hurdle, I want to kind of like keep pushing it, keep exploring, and see what's out there.
That's beautiful. I love how that experience kind of set you in a different trajectory. And I think the way that happens in life is awesome. And you were at Bright Moments just last month. Perhaps that in real life makes you say, I want more in real life stuff. I want more things where I can actually see my collectors and push the boundaries there. That's what's so cool about this. I mean, we had a Spaces with Leo Villarreal. He just launched a collection, Cosmic Bloom, but he's talked about using generative techniques and some of the randomization in lighting installations. He's famous for doing lighting installations, San Francisco Bay Bridge, etc. And so there's just so many places that this can go. And I want to hop into your collections in a second. I got to ask you. You talk about your sculpture training and talents there. Have you thought about a way to mix that in? I mean, I don't know enough about it. Like Peter Posma comes to mind as a great generative artist who's doing that. Aranda Lash Primitives collection that recently launched has some sort of 3D elements, and I think there's a physical coming in that with that as well. I know Erick has been making some like clay for those editions he did with Proof Grails too. Yeah, I'm curious. I guess maybe there's that question, and then if not, if there is something specific you have in mind that you're working on right now.
Well, I can say that from the very beginning, 2018, when we all sat down and kind of chatted, and Erick told us about art blocks, one of the like the earliest ideas around that time was like, well, this could be used to create a physical public sculpture that's interactive, that people can sort of like use the blockchain and like Web3 and like tokens to like interact with this public thing, right? So like if you picture it, maybe like you can picture it like, what if Leo Villarreal's bridge in the Bay Bridge, which is basically completely illuminated by LEDs that are all reactive and running in real time, right? What if that bridge was interactable, where like somebody who buys a token can like maybe send a transaction to this contract, and that contract sends a like somehow controls the lights on that bridge and like causes them to react in a particular way, like something like that was just like a really early, just kind of wild, crazy thought that and an idea that we were kind of tossing around. Well, Erick and I and Pete were tossing that around for a little bit. And so like at the back of my mind, I've always been like, somehow this is going to come full circle, and it's going to come to physical, sculptural, present things. And so I've always got my ear like to like the ground, what's going on with the digital modeling space. I teach digital fabrication. I teach people how to 3D model and how to sculpt with computers and things like that. And so like it's very much up my alley. And I've definitely thought about creating a generative project that outputs like STLs or OBJs, basically 3D models that can be sent straight to the 3D printer. And then there's already a platform that's even focusing on that out there. I don't have the name at the top of my head, but and I've seen a couple of artists, even Artblocks artists, exploring that concept, including Erick himself and a couple of others. Not Peter Pasma. Luke Shannon has kind of been exploring that a little bit, and a few others.
I love the exploration. Sorry to cut you off. Of the physical. I mean, I just ordered my screens prints. I'm obsessed with being able to get like the originals to represent not only physically but digitally. I love what Erick's doing with the pottery. Slightly jelly that I didn't get one from Proof, because I'd love to have a piece of pottery. But I also think that in talking with more artists and not being an artist myself, but having that connection to physical, I think allows for a greater depth of coding, because you almost like feel this propensity to dive deeper into a product and try to represent it in a digital fashion. I mean, when we talked to him upon, it was really big about his physically integrating experiences of his life into it. And I'm hearing something similar to you. So that kind of throughput and consistency across what I would consider great artists is really an intriguing data point. And a transition to IRL stuff is I wanted to talk about Bright Moments and your Bosque release. I'm not even going to try to pronounce the full name. I'll allow you to introduce that.
And we'll hop on to the screen here, and I'm going to turn off the video so folks can focus on the art over here. But yeah, we have a Deca gallery for everybody who's just listening on audio. It's going to be in the show notes. Check it out. We have some of Daniel's amazing art here, and we're going to ask you to break it down a little bit. So I curated
for sure
a little collection for you. Can you see the screen here?
Yeah, I can see it.
This is, again, I will say one of, if not the most well-received from a collector community of the, Bright Moments Mexico City. So I just wanted to, on behalf of P and I and Collectors Corner, tell you that this is amazing outputs. I think that the community has spoken and it has a deep resonance with everybody. It's absolutely beautiful. I love when you blow these up onto a large screen, the amount of detail. It almost reminds me of a Monet, with the dot art of being able to connect with, a visual picture from afar, but then you get up close and you see just, I mean, the one I'm looking at right now, enlarged on my screen, not the one that's being showed, it has a brick wall, and the amount of detail that went into it in the background, it's absolutely incredible. So job well done. Sadly, I wasn't able to make it to Mexico City. I had a birthday that I was celebrating, but I would have loved to have seen some of these come across out of the generator. But walk us through, if you don't mind, kind of the inspiration behind this and what you're how you got to this point on such a large platform, and also I'd like to hear a little bit of a divergence from the art. But I know that you and Eric were born and raised in Mexico City, so like, what did it mean to you personally to have that platform to release your art and allow kind of to have its own moment amongst a place that was so meaningful to you?
Well, okay, thank you for from what you said about the collection. It's definitely like this is the first time I've ever experienced something like this where I create a work of art, and not only am I like able to like I'm expressing something like myself, but I'm through the community, I've learned so much more about myself and about the work of art, and just about like, I guess, like the importance of like putting myself out there, and like and really aiming high with doing trying to do something great. I can say that, like, I guess, well, the question is like how like what's the inspiration behind it. So Bosque de Chapultepec. Let me just say this real quick. Bosque de Chapultepec. So Chapultepec is actually an old Nahuatl word for grasshopper hill. And so Chapulte is grasshopper, and so Bosque de Chapultepec. And in the very middle of this park, there's a huge hill, and on that hill, there's a big castle. And so you can call it Grasshopper Hill if it's easier. So Bosque de Chapultepec is a special place, obviously, like in Mexico City. It's like the Central Park of Mexico City, right? It's even bigger than New York Central Park. It's older. It's been there for, human civilization has been there for more than like 1,500 years or so. There's traces of old cultures working and living there, but it's just a beautiful place. Like, even if you take away the history, like visually, it's an urban oasis. Literally, there's palm trees, there's like a tropical plants in the middle of one of the most urban cities you could ever imagine, right? Like a concrete jungle, right? And so, like, it's a beautiful place just in and of itself, and it sort of captures the vibe of Mexico City, of just like the jungle, and it's a jungle vibe with a lot of active stuff happening. It's a very trendy place at the moment. But yeah, the park is it's an old place, but it's also like ingrained in, I would say, like just like the collective mind of people who are from Mexico City. Like it's a common place. Everybody knows it. Everybody in Mexico City knows it, but people outside don't know it. And for me, the inspiration was just like I was closing my eyes one day, and I was just thinking, like, what could I do with bright moments? And I had some other ideas too, like a generative snake, just like some really exotic sort of snake thing. I don't know. I was playing with all kinds of weird ideas. At one point, I was thinking of like creating cacti and eagles and snakes, and I don't know, just really weird stuff, right? But at one point, I was like, that's not genuine. Like, it's not me. I need to connect with myself through this project. And I closed my eyes, and I just, like, my mom's words popped into, like, I just pictured her saying Bosque de Chapultepec, like, because she would say it for various times throughout our lives, just talking about the park. And we all, like, she grew up right next to the park, and just hearing her voice in my mind, like, say the name, and it triggered this vision of like a forest, and a forest scene with a lot of trees and a dense sort of, maybe at moments kind of spooky, but beautiful nonetheless. And so I started kind of exploring that, and I got home that day and I said, you know what, I have to make this forest. I have to bring this place into existence, like in this blockchain space where the name of a project circulates just as much as like the images do, right? So if I can take these words and make them more known, then that means people are learning. There's an educational component to this, and people are learning about the existence of a place. And I actually got that from a project that Jake Rockland made for Artblocks called Patchwork Sagueros. Basically, it's a cactus And I didn't know anything about these cacti, right? Like I thought they were all over the United States, but no, I didn't know what a saguaro cactus was. And I learned about that through an art blocks project. And I thought, holy shit, like there's something there. People can learn through art, right? And so part of the idea was like, how can I bring this knowledge or this, like this learning through a project, and it kind of came together through Bosque de Chapultepec. I'm introducing a place that exists in reality. And so, for a while, I started playing with, just lines and points and making trees and paths and whatnot. And literally, I started doing this in like mid-July. And I actually, for me as an educator, right? As soon as the semester starts, and anybody out there who teaches probably knows this too, is that like half of your useful time goes away because you got to set up a lesson plans, you've got to meet with students, you got to get to campus, you got to set up your it just takes up a lot of time. And then after you're done teaching, like you're pretty much drained, and like all your creative energy is kind of like not there anymore, right? So like teaching semester was right around the corner for me, and I was like, I got to make a quick decision. I have like a couple of projects coming up, and either I go all in on generative art and make this my full-time job, or I'm just never gonna like really feel connected with what I do, right? And so I decided to take the semester off, and so I didn't teach this semester, and I went 100% in to generative art. That means like I'm waking up at like 11 a.m. Well, I'm waking up at 9 a.m. and I get started at around 11.
I love that.
I'm an artist. What can I say, right?
I still up till 3 in the morning. I can respect that. Don't you worry.
Yeah. So I stay up and I code all day, and I'm working on this project all day up until 2, 3 in the morning every single day. And this is my daily routine, Monday through Friday, even Saturdays, Sundays. Like it's just like I'm all in on this, right? And so that gave me a lot of time to explore it myself, explore my concept, explore the idea, explore the code, figure out ways to make it work. And so this project is really like a serious labor of love. So many hours went into this, and like hours of revisions and taking something and stepping it back and eliminating things and filtering things. And I mean, it was a whole lot of work. And through that process, I tend to push myself in ways that are just extreme, right? And I like that. That's how I learn the best, right? Like I was hallucinating code. I was hallucinating dots by the end of this. As I walk outside and I look at trees, I'm just like, every leaf is a dot, right? And so it was definitely an awesome like feat of effort for me. I went all in, and I think that the results sort of kind of speak to that.
Results definitely speak to it. I mean, honestly, it's beautiful. The more you dig into the project, the more you like flip through each one, the amount of attention to detail that goes into each piece when you do get close is really profound. So what inspired the dots component of this art, just out of curiosity?
Well, I really love impressionism. I'm a big fan of a couple of different movements from that time. The impressionistic approach of capturing light and capturing a very particular moment in time through brushstrokes. And then, of course, the pointillistic movement. I wouldn't really call this pointillism personally, because pointillism is more about using dots to generate color. But this is not really using dots to generate color. This is using dots to generate form. So it's not particularly pointillism, but the Fauvist movement shortly after is one that I really connected with. And early on with this project, I turned to I looked at a lot of Fauvist pieces. They painted a lot of forests, trees, and I found the work by Andre Derain. There's a couple of early works by him. I think they're just small painting sketches, where he uses points to generate. Let's see if I can find the link and I'll send it to you. You can post it. He uses points to generate things like trees and forests and whatnot. And I really I like that aesthetic. So I kind of pursued that. The color wise, the Fauvists are also really into like using random color, not really using color logically, but rather almost irrationally. And so I kind of like that too. So Yeah, there you go. So if you just click on images and kind of scroll down, you'll see all kinds of, and if I see one, I'll tell you to click on it. So he's using like this sort of point-based expressive sort of style. It's an aesthetic that, I sort of I used this as inspiration early on. But there's also as I started coding and as the dots became a thing, like this is called circle packing, by the way. It's just an algorithm that puts down a circle and it checks, makes sure that there's no circles near it. So what happens is you get this like grid of circles that never overlap, right? So as I got into it, I started realizing that the circle packing aesthetic it actually connected with this pastry that I had as a child growing up. It's called a Garibaldi, and it's made by El Globo pastry shop in Mexico City. And this pastry is literally covered in sprinkles, right? And sprinkles are just a whole bunch of little dots. Like they like naturally circle pack themselves, right? And so there you go. So these Garibaldis are sort of like I realized after the circle packing, I was like, oh my God, this is just like the Garibaldis. And I love Garibaldis and I love the way they look. And so I have to bring the Garibaldi into this project and have to kind of emphasize the circle packing and like connect it to that. And
I have to be honest, I'm gonna interrupt you here, man. The amount
yeah,
of thought that you and Erick put into this to represent Mexico City is like absolutely stunning. I mean, we listened to him on the Proof podcast talk about it, and I'm rude in interrupting your flow here, but I'm just like flabbergasted at the amount of attention you're putting towards your outputs, and I love this podcast because we're able to tease these out and share them with a greater community. But I mean, it's absolutely dynamic, man. I
thank
mean,
you.
thank you for sharing it, and I'm sorry to interrupt that flow. I mean, I've just been scrolling through.
See, the thing is like that's like the exact point. Is it like it's either it's either like all or nothing really at this point for me. Like I'm going all in to generative art. This is my career at this point, and I have to put my whole heart into it because if I'm not putting my whole self into it, my whole heart into it, then I'm not giving out the best, and I'm not putting myself genuinely out there. And I think that this is important for other artists too, is that once you start bringing elements of yourself into the work takes on a whole nother meaning, not only for collectors, but also for you as an artist. And I truly believe that if you create a work of art that when you release it, you feel somewhat vulnerable, like and exposed, like that's a good feeling. That means that there's something about you in that piece that, I mean, obviously you can be judged by it or whatnot, but there's something in you, a part of you is in that piece, and that makes a work of art just exponentially more significant.
Yeah, the more I'm listening to you talk, I mean, it's 100% evident that this is definitely representative of a heart and soul, and very it has a depth to it that it shows up as a collector. I mean, I was drawn to it initially, and now it's like, Jesus, now I need to buy like 10 of them because it's insane.
Yeah, it was a whole nother experience being there and sitting in that room with Daniel and being able to eat one of the Garibaldis, which was just super cool. And he brought them for everybody who minted one, which was
Yeah.
nice and had kind of like a park like feel in the room. I wanted to tell you, I think you nailed it on the head here with Bosque de Chapultepec. Now that I have the words in front of me, I can finally pronounce it. But my fiance, her family's from Mexico City, like about 3 hours away, but she knew the park. She saw the images and she was like, "Oh, this is so cool." And she's not Web3 native or anything like that. And so I think that there's a simplicity in here that resonates, almost like when you see a star athlete playing and you're like, wow, they make it look so easy. You made it look easy, which means it was really, really hard. And
Yeah,
I
it
think
was hard. It was hard.
I wanted to ask you actually, like, do you so I curated a few of these, and maybe since our audience and we like to nerd out on some of the details here, do you want to talk through any of the above? So this first set, I wanted to just kind of highlight some of the colors, and I highlighted that throughout. And then the second set we're here seeing on the screen, I wanted to highlight the foliage, and actually I think this one on the
Oh
right
yeah,
is a
definitely.
one of one.
Hmm.
It's a collection of 100, but it's the only one that has multiple colors within a single tree as opposed to just different trees being different foliage. And then just like super quickly, I love these ones. These are 46 on the left, 48 in the middle and 40 on the right. It just felt like a complete forest triptych. You know, you got the city in the background here, so almost felt like, yeah, there's like some of them are outside of the city, and then there are the background skies here. And I
Yeah,
think I was with you when this one here minted in the middle here, which is number
that's cool.
83.
That's the eclipse.
Yeah, and then there's finally just the backgrounds here with like sometimes you see a city, sometimes you kind of, well, this is more the sky. So yeah, any of the above that you want to talk through
For
and
sure. If you scroll up to that like sort of rainbow colored one on the right, that one is was really cool because it was actually minted by Seth from Bright Moments. So like the
wow.
founder of Bright Moments, he got that one, and it was a total surprise when it appeared on the screen. Everyone was like, "Whoa, what?" It was really fun. But yeah, there's the actual the coloration you see in this in these types, the one with the rainbow colors, is actually just a, it's not, I wouldn't call it a glitch, but like a quirk with the way color works in just P5. I'm working in this HSB color space, the hue, saturation, and brightness color space. And what I'm doing is I'm going around the wheel of the color wheel, like a 360 degrees, right? And so when I get to 360, if I go to 361, it jumps back to one, right? And so it actually captures like the whole spectrum in that process. And so there's just very few of these types that came out, but it's definitely a weird quirk that appeared, and I sort of embraced it. But yeah, like a lot of these mints that came through, there's a lot of weeding out that I did with this algorithm, just kind of trying to get a certain amount of consistency because the edition size is so small, right? At 100 mints, I want there to be a very common thread amongst all these, to where when you look at one, you know exactly what the project is. It resembles all the others, but maybe color and maybe form and composition are slightly different. Some of the ones that I really enjoyed are, I like the ones that have wavy paths personally. So like if you go to the very top, or maybe the green ones too, let's see if there's any of the ones that have like a wavy path. I love the wavy path. It was so fun to code that wavy path. So exactly like that. That's that right there. And that color palette you're looking at right there is the original color palette. Like that's where I started. So it's got the green foliage, the dark blue sky, and then the brown trees. And then from there, I took that color palette and sort of tweaked it in different ways to get all the range of colors. But I will say that one thing about this project that that is maybe like where I pushed myself a lot was with color.
Can we talk about this? Because I think this
Yeah,
is
yeah.
actually the best part of the project is the colors. I've been like, you probably see me toggling on and off of mute because I'm so ecstatic about like the coloration and palettes that you implemented is honestly, I think, next level. I actually just clicked into my favorite is number 50. And I had a little bit of a bout of depression because 0x Houston owns it, which means I probably have no shot of ever owning the damn thing. But that being said, I am so excited about the palettes here. I'd love to hear more about like how your process came to be because it
For
was
sure.
the more I click into, the more I'm just like beside myself.
I can honestly say about myself that color was my weakness for a long time. Around when I learned that I was going to do a project for Bright Moments, the first thing that came to mind was, you know what? I have to understand color. I have to wrap my mind around color in a way that works, because previously I'm working with color using randomness and saying randomness is what determines color for my projects. That's what generative art should be, right? It should be a like completely random color that the algorithm kind of generates on the fly. But I don't think that was necessarily working for me so much, you know? And so I decided to invest a lot of time into color. And that means I watched videos on YouTube. I bought books. I played with palettes. I, you know, did all kinds of stuff to where I had to understand color from like a different perspective. And it made sense. My realization is color is everything, and color will make or break a project. So you can have the most beautiful project, but if the colors are not right, it just does not work, right? So it became a very central part of my exploration So what I did was I got some books and I read and read and read. And I went to the library and whatnot, and I would just sit there and look at books about color, graphic design books. They have tricks and whatnot. But it wasn't until I found a video on YouTube about color relativity. And color relativity, it was like the thing that made everything click for me. You can have a blue color next to like a gray color and they'll both look blue, right? Because the blue is like kind of dominating and the gray sort of takes on this bluish hue. And so this project, what I'm doing is I'm incorporating these ideas of color relativity into the compositions. And what it creates is a super rich color experience. And that's new to me. I'm still kind of in awe that color can do this. It's something that literally I learned in a matter of, well, I mean, over a couple of months learning color, but then like when I watched one particular video, it clicked and I was like, holy shit, this all makes sense, right? So like color relativity is what's happening here. And I would definitely want to explore more of that.
Yeah, and it's probably nice that you have Jeff Davis there. You probably your buddy you've worked with for a long
I've got
time,
his books too.
who's like a master on color theory. And yeah, no, you really nailed it with this one. I think it's beautiful. And talking about colors, I mean, even here on the screen right now, I'm showing some green ones. This is the 46, 48, and 40. It just still feels very vibrant, even though you're not
Mhm.
using a huge range of the possible color palette.
Well, the thing is that I can pick up on very subtle change in color. And imagine like if I'm naive, I'm coming into this like saying the sky should be blue, the grass should be green, and the leaves should be green, right? But that totally kills color. Like like just going with full chroma, like hues, right? Color can work in this relative way where if you have the sky as red and the leaves is red and the trees is red, but each one of those reds is a slight variation of red in a particular direction, then you actually create a depth in color that is very subtle but extremely effective. And so like that's sort of I think like what's going on here. Just really subtle shifts in hue and saturation between different elements create a very sort of vivid, harmonious balance that works really well. And so like I want to explore more of that, and it's definitely happening here. I think that's the richness of the color.
Absolutely. And as I was looking through this, I recognized that the background colors, like say this one, for example, what number is this? Number 75. I mean, it's completely purple in the background, but then you kind of have a shade of purple here, which is probably like a mountain or some kind of a structure in the
Hmm.
distance. And I just, zooming in, I was like, wow, the whole background is purple. And that was really beautiful and different. And yeah, I mean, okay, I could talk about this project for a really long time. That we're probably gonna have to skip a couple of the other ones, but talking about color, I mean, what really struck me about Marfa Yucca, your project here, is that the colors you use are fantastic. So maybe we can like
Hmm.
transition over to this project, and I think perhaps we'll save Genesis for a round two if when we get that going. But yeah, because I wanna spend time on Marfa Yucca, and I love Marfa Yucca. I think it's a really, really interesting project. Maybe you can explain well, I'll tee it up a little bit. So, this was initially a mint that you could get by going to Marfa, Texas, when Artblocks had their event on November 11th, 12th, 13th, around those days. And right now, when I last checked, there were about 300 of these that had been minted, but it's an open edition. It's part of the new Artblocks Explorations. So, can you tell folks what is kind of the plan for Marfa Yucca? And how long will it be open for? I think you have to go to Marfa to actually mint one now. And then, yeah, and then maybe we can just like that tiny bit of context, and then talk a little bit about the color because I feel like a lot of your color studies came through here. I've
Yeah, they did.
created a bunch of these that are fantastic.
Yeah. So it's actually kind of funny because I created Marfa. I say yucca, but yucca is also a proper word for it. It just depends on like regional differences and the way it's pronounced. Yucca can also refer to like the food, which is a different plant. But so I say yucca. Maybe it's just like a Texas thing.
No, that's my fault. Yucca.
So the funny thing is that I actually created Marfa Yucca before Bosque de Chapultepec, but the colors were different. And then once I learned about color relativity and the importance of contrast and whatnot, I actually like sort of towards the end, I came back into Marfa Yucca and tweaked all the colors of every single palette to make them a little bit more harmonious. And so it's sort of retroactively color adjusted compared to what it was before. But yeah, the project is great. Like I love what Artblocks is doing with explorations. You know, the first project was the friendship bracelets, and Marfa Yucca is the second project. And these projects sort of explore a different side of generative art. Maybe like things that, you know, like let's say they have an artist residency or something. You know, like projects that kind of relate to the community or you know, I think that you can get like the best explanation of what Artblocks Explorations is from them. But for me, like these are community driven projects where like they go out to the community at different price points or potentially free, you know, as gifts or whatnot. And everybody that went to Marfa for the open house was able to claim one if they were able to do it within the window. And then now what Artblocks is planning on doing is opening up the Minter for in-person visitors because just like any random day of the week, you know, people walk into the Artblocks gallery and a lot of those people have never heard of generative art. They don't know about Web3. They don't know about NFTs. And so they're walking in there just looking for art and trying to experience what Marfa has in terms of, you know, art offerings. And so they're walking in there and they're learning about Artblocks and they want to know, like, how can I get involved? Like, how can I be part of this? What do I need to do? And so there's like the whole onboarding thing. Like you got to have a Web3 wallet and you have to understand what your address is and MetaMask and all that kind of stuff. And so what Artblocks is doing with this project is when people walk into the gallery, they can look at all the artwork that's on the walls. And then if they desire, they can sort of get onboarded onto Web3 and collect one of these. So it's sort of like an incentive to help onboard people that are just visiting casually and stumble across Artblocks. Like that's a great opportunity for them to get involved and kind of like get a piece of something that's regionally important. You know, like this is about Marfa and this is about Donald Judd and about his sculpture, but also about the yuccas. So it's very much like a keepsake from their travels to Marfa, but also just something cool to remember Marfa by. So that's sort of what I think Artblocks has in mind. And I don't know the full details. I know that they're kind of planning on opening the Minter up soon, possibly like mid-December. And then it'll stay open for maybe a month, maybe longer. I'm not really sure, but it's an open edition, and at some point there will be some more mints coming through the Minter. I personally myself am going to go down there with some friends to get some non-crypto friends and get them onboarded into Web3 just through this project. So I'm looking forward to going down there and having my friends mint a couple of these.
Yeah, this is such a cool project for so many reasons. I mean, the history behind it with Donald Judd, the fact that it is an open edition, the second Art Blocks Explorations, although it kind of almost feels like the first one because Friendship Bracelets feels a little different in some ways. And interestingly, so only 298 minted. I'm looking at OpenSea right now, 97% unique owners. So these are not changing hands, and that I've never seen anything honestly above 60.
That's really cool.
Yeah, so that is really fantastic, and it's beautiful, man. I wanted to maybe we can like talk through how you thought some of the elements in our sort of classic deep dive style. So you know, you have the box fill, which refers to the box fill trait, which refers to the color and the filling of the box itself. I assume. Actually, let me go up here. Yeah. So I'm just gonna like name the traits that I kind of caught my eye and added some variety, and then you can take it whichever way you want. If there's any of those that you particularly like or want to talk about. So I'll scroll through here real quick. So there's box fill here, so we get different colors of the box fill in these first.
Just real quick, that top right one, that one right
Mhm.
there, I think that's possibly one of a kind. There's only one of those. It's the pink. Well, I think I've gone through so many traits for other projects in the last few days. I want to say the trait's called rose. It's just a rose palette, but there's only one of them came out that way with the natural yucca. So that one right there is like a pretty unique mint. So yeah, we'd be very lucky to see another one of those pop out in the, if more of them mint. So
That one is on sale. So
oh really?
whoever's
Okay.
listed it, if the yeah, you're right. It's pink box fill with the natural yucca and the rose palette.
Okay, cool. All right, sorry. So you're gonna say
No, please. Yeah, feel free to interrupt me. So I pulled out a couple more of these box fills here. This one on the left here is 261. I just love the way it kind of looked like soil and reminded me of earth. And sorry, I think soil is the name of the box fill. And then on the right here, number 91, it was a light box fill, which I found really cool. And I'm just gonna skip over a couple because I really wanted to ask you about this because this one, number 91, the background with the squares, you had a few that were tributes. I believe that one is a tribute to Herbert Franke or Frank.
yeah, Herbert Frank. The Artblocks house actually has one of the original pen plots by him in their gallery, which is basically just squares like that. And it was done with just pens like in the 1960s, right? And so it actually looked really great as a background, and not I mean not it looks great as an artwork, but putting it as a background really kind of was I think a great way to kind of bring all these elements together. And unfortunately, Herbert Frank died earlier this year, and as well as Charles Ksuri, who both of which are incredibly influential generative artists from the 60s and 70s that barely got to see the excitement of the NFT space. And so I just felt it appropriate to kind of honor them in any way that I could. In this case, the one you're looking at here, the black one and the green one, those are Charles Suri homages. And what he did is he also worked with lines and point data, kind of like the same way I'm doing it with plottables and whatnot. And so I find that really inspiring. And what he's known for doing is like taking these sort of drawings that he would make and exploding the lines into various like abstract sort of forms. And so what I'm doing here to honor his work is basically taking these box forms and sort of exploding them into these sort of more abstracted like box like shapes.
There's an in real life sculpture challenge for you. If you can make a sculpture that's all kind of exploded like
That
this.
would be really cool. Yeah.
Donald Judd.
Just take a Donald Judd sculpture and just blow it up.
Exactly. And then put a yucca in it.
Yeah, there you go.
Cool. Yeah, I love how artists have been doing their homages to various earlier artists who kind of laid down the space. And yeah, those are just beautiful. And I see now what you mean about the flowers. I've never seen them in person, but I feel like there's a chance to experience them a little bit. So the other traits that I showcased here, one was boxes. I went with a 1, 4, 16, and 64. The 64 being really rare, and so I highlighted those to show the variety there. And I also wanted to show, you have palettes, which is I believe kind of the canvas or the background color, and then we have the box color itself, and then the yucca color. We've been talking a lot about color, and I can showcase some of these, but which one of these combos did you like the best or feel like came out the best? I have a few of my own that I really like, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that. The triple color combination or triple color category combinations.
So part of like what I've been interested in, and I guess I can start off by saying one of my favorite projects is ringers. I love ringers. Yeah, you understand, right? But what is it about ringers that I love, right? And I ask myself that all the time. And I think it's just the boldness, right? And the high contrast. So like when I work on projects, like in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, like how can how can I bring more contrast into this, or like make it like bold and sort of like like in a ringer style. And obviously this isn't ringers, right? But what I'm kind of doing with these color palettes is I'm trying to simplify colors down to where there's one, two, or three, because there's a element of contrast that can emerge from that. I love looking at these. So yeah,
Yeah, so sorry not to distract
no,
you,
no,
but
that's great.
when we put this together, I was like, wow, because you almost never see all the colored ones since they were kind of vaulted away.
So like obviously there's a lot of generative things happening, with the algorithm in terms of like wrapping a string around a peg. But if you like kind of take a step back from the algorithms and you just look at it compositionally and formally, like what's happening here is these are high contrast, very bold pieces. And the boldness and the simplicity, I think, are just easy to digest, and they provide less friction to internalize what you're looking at, right? They're
Mhm.
easy to take in. And I love that, right? And so like with some of those palettes with the yucca, what I'm trying to do is just kind of simplify things to where there's just one or two colors and there's a bold contrast happening, right? Just like, for example, the ones that don't have box fill, like that one right there, the black and white one, like that's literally just one color, which is white. You could say the black is just the paper or whatever. And so like in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, well, these would be great for screen printing, to make some kind of poster, just a one color, quick screen print. So I'm kind of playing with ideas that could relate back to screen printing, but also simplicity and color and whatnot. But then, of course, there's like these, which have the natural yucca. And part of the beauty of the yucca is that yellowish flower. And I thought, well, if I just have silhouettes, then I'm not really showcasing this beauty. And so I wanted to include some of these natural ones, and the natural ones are paired with their backgrounds, and I think they look great. I love the natural uh, yucca outputs.
Okay, so a philosophical question for you. Sorry to cut you off. The I was really drawn to the natural ones, not actually knowing what a yucca looks like in nature. Do you think now that as you've studied color more, there is something about I guess, like the natural colors that we see that we're more drawn to? Or yeah, like how do you think about that? Or am I just crazy?
No, no, you're not definitely not crazy. I mean, there's it's two different worlds, right? Like when you take away color and you're working with silhouettes, you're working with just pure abstraction. You're working in an abstract mental space. It's not realistic or not naturalistic. But then, by doing that, you're omitting the naturalistic world. And these types of outputs, like the kinds of algorithms I've been writing lately, they really relate to nature, like branching patterns of trees or yuccas. And like the way the yucca spike ball on there is constructed, it's actually using like the golden angle, the way that an actual plant would grow. It's using I think the angle is like 137.5 degrees. I always look it up. I always Google it every time I work because I never remember it. But it's basically using like actual like ratios that nature uses, to produce itself, right? And so there's an implicitly naturalistic element to these works. And so by bringing in naturalistic colors, it just heightens what we already know to be a yucca, and it makes it more identifiable and easier to understand.
Feel like I keep fanboying on your research here, but it's one of the things that became evident in talking to artists. Like even in Marfa, we were talking to James, who just released Ori, and the amount of time he put into like understanding like algorithmically like the dynamic and the fold of every. I mean, I think that having this level of detail, even just you referencing the golden angle and trying to mimic nature, it shows, and it's so refreshing to hear this because it means it's not intended to fake, but rather accurately represent. And this level of detail, it definitely shows up in your work, man. I mean, I'm just becoming more and more of a fan the more and more we talk, because the amount of thought and attention and dedication to the craft is so overwhelmingly apparent. It's incredible.
Yeah, and we were talking beforehand about how Jared and I both fumbled our Marfa yuccas despite being there in person. And now I really do want one. I'm like, oh crap, how can I? I might have to make that trip
You're
out.
gonna have to make a trip out there. Yeah. Maybe there's an Amtrak that goes through.
You know, I seriously doubt it, but if we can find something, it's worth the trip. And you know, I wanted to ask you just we've been talking a lot about the art. How do you feel about the art blocks exploration? Not as a concept, but this, I guess, conceptually, but this project specifically too. The fact that it's an open edition, that it kind of is, you know, you have to be there in person to get it, whether it was earlier or later when they reopen it. Yeah, like how do you think about that, and how did that influence your algorithm?
Oh, it definitely influenced a lot because first off, I had no idea if there was going to be 100 people or 500 people or more, right? Or if someone was going to bot the thing and somehow figure out a way to like mint, 1,000 of them with a couple of clicks. You never know, right? But so just with that in mind, I kind of aimed for 300 to 500 outputs. And it's definitely a huge consideration, when you make a generative project is like how many, like, can the algorithm keep up with the edition size? The last thing I want is to have a project that becomes extremely repetitive. And for me, every single mint should bring something new and something surprising and maybe like something unexpected, right? So like it is important for me to kind of gauge the edition size and kind of aim my algorithm to be able to keep up with that. So I did a lot of editing and making sure that there was enough variety, like by adding more boxes, different size boxes, different number of yuccas inside each. What's cool about the like working with plants though is that like plants give a lot of variety. They can grow in so many different ways. Like you can get a plant that's really twisted and whatnot, and then get a plant that's really straight. And it's nature. So it's not like totally unimaginable that it could exist in real life. So just like the inherent nature of yuccas created a lot of variety in the way that they can grow. And then playing with the boxes, just different ways of putting them in boxes and arranging them. Like, there's a lot of room for variation in this. And I think that was kind of like one of the funner parts of it is I love configurations. Like I love like permutations and combinations of different things in one composition.
Yeah, I love how this is in an open edition that's not going to get abused, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, like mint as many as you can. And like in my mind, I'm thinking like no matter how you hit this algorithm, it'll always produce something unique and new because there's so much configuration variety in there. So even if there was 1,000 of them, like everybody would feel like they got a unique output.
Well, we're starting to run long on time, and I really wanted to dig into Genesis, but at the same time, will maybe this is we're gonna have a part two because this has been way more incredibly fun than I ever imagined, and I take that as I had a high bar, so it's a compliment to the dynamic thought you're putting into your responses. But I did want to hit on Genesis, and just for anybody listening, expensive. It's not for everybody, right? Right now, it's sitting at a 9.35 ETH floor, but just historically significant for anybody. If it wasn't as implied on through some of this conversation, you've been there from the very beginning alongside Erick and and Jeff on the development of art blocks. Having a day zero set is to have a genesis, and to be able to be there. I'm at a loss of words for, when you set this off. We talked about like you thought maybe you'd have 10 minted, and now it's at a 10 ETH floor. It's just absolutely incredible. A 2-year journey. It feels like your art is starting to have a new meaning and depth to it, and maybe we'll dig deeper into it on the next one if you're gracious enough to spend some more time. But at least for today, I wanted to mention that DCA, Genesis, Day Zero, absolutely a must see. I mean, the amount of I'm a big collector of Day Zero squiggles. One of the first 541.
Wow.
So thank you, Von Mises, for the little alpha leak early on. But I'm a firm believer in art blocks, and this Genesis release is it's interwoven to the fabric of art blocks, and it's such a staple of it, and it really stands as a foundation for what was to become art blocks, and the platform of choice for generative art. And no disrespect to anybody else, but it really does stand on its own, and Genesis in itself is a very monumental project. So I'd be remiss if we didn't at least take a moment to take a nod of the squiggle hat here and say, good job, man.
Thanks. Yeah, Genesis, it's a special project to me. It's, it's from before Artblocks times. And just to see it live out its existence, and it's definitely appreciated by so many people. But the interesting thing is it's not trying to be anything. It's just, shapes, colors on a canvas, shapes, colors, and composition on a canvas. And in a way, it's like so simple that it exemplifies what generative means, like it's just about creating unique outputs. So it's a very simple concept, and it's not even that like that's all it is. I mean, obviously it can be more than that, or it can be less than that, depending on how you look at it. But for me, every time I look at Genesis, like I feel happy that it came out the way it did. Yeah, I don't know. It's like a part of me, like I don't know what to say about it. Besides that, I truly love the way it all unfolded and the kind of place that this project has taken in the bigger scheme of things. I wish it was very affordable so that more people could get it. When it minted out, it was, I think, what, like $50, right?
Yeah, in all fairness, it was affordable for a long time. It's kind of, this Artblocks, series 8 series complete set narrative kind of, and Day Zero, right? I mean, there's a Day Zero narrative behind collecting too. That
Oh, you know what? Okay, hang on a second. Let me grab something. Okay, so I almost got by without showing this.
Let me share the screen.
All right,
Stop
for
the
sure.
feature so we can see you.
So this is the Gen Trilogy book, and this is something that I created just a little over a year ago now at this point. But it's a book of all of my projects, my first 3 projects: Genesis, Gen 2, and Gen 3. And what it is just a sort of like a expose of just showing some really beautiful Genesis large size, in a print publication that you can share with your friends and whatnot, and kind of help them understand what these projects are in a physical form. But what's cool about it is it includes every single mint in the entire project. So there's like sort of thumbnails, and it shows like who minted it, what time exactly it was minted, what all the features are.
these commercially available?
So these are actually these are gifts that I have been giving out to collectors of my work.
Super dope.
So if you own a Genesis, a Gen 2, or Gen 3, there's a forum on my Twitter profile. You can just go on there and and I'll ship it out to you. The only thing, you pay shipping, but it's been great. I've been literally shipping like 3 to 5 of these per week for the last year. So there's so it's
that goes back to, to come full circle is, the physical nature of this. I mean, there's a couple artists out there that once you're kind of get behind the curtains and you do these little things for the collector community, I think it's absolutely brilliant. Creates a connection to the pieces. Probably why these things have a damn 10 floors, because everybody gets a book and doesn't want to sell it.
Yeah, you started giving out the books and just took off.
Yeah. I might have to buy a Gen 3. My favorite one is Unconfirmed NFT Greedy Dude right now. So
well, with Fake It Till You Make It really starting to catch some attention. I'm like, this is, I know the words are not the same and the project's not the same, but yeah, I'm like this.
Yeah, it's a different type of project. Well, we could probably say that for another time because we're running out of time.
Let's say that for part 2, because I want to get you out of here at a reasonable time.
Cool.
And I know you just woke up and you start getting working. No, I'm just kidding. And for people listening, it's about 3 p.m. Daniel did not just wake up.
It's the artist's life.
I know. One thing that I've noticed, and I wanted to ask you, like a lot of folks in this space are collectors as well, not just artists, and they kind of wear both hats. Where do you fall on that spectrum? Do you collect a lot? And if so, what kind of things do you like to collect?
I do a little bit of collecting. I don't do a lot of it. The reason is because, I'm good at creating ideas and creating like, visual things. I'm not really good, handling financial things. I didn't go to finance school. I, the word profit or money was not mentioned once throughout my 7-year educational program, right? Like they don't teach this kind of stuff in art school. So I'm more comfortable behind the computer and just making art. And when I can collect, I will collect. And sometimes I end up just buying things at unreasonable prices because, I'm just not like the most savvy financial trader or whatnot, right? So like I don't collect, and also Dutch auctions like terrify me. so I get what I can when I can, when I'm like super compelled to do it. I also want to support like artists that I'm friends with and people that I think are like up and coming and whatnot. Like there's a lot of people that I really appreciate and I want their work and I want to own a piece of it and just have it forever. I don't necessarily do it for like the flip or whatever, but there's been occasions where I have, I've fallen into a good windfalls where I've maybe minted something and it gained extreme, value and I might be compelled to sell it. And I have a couple times, just because why not, right? Like it's part of the fun.
Yeah, and I totally hear you on that. And we try to collect for the longer term as well. I'm curious, what kind of things do you like that you buy that you have zero interest in selling? I guess okay,
Oh,
fine.
good.
Maybe if it
Yeah.
ends up being worth $1 billion, you would sell it. But like assuming that you're like, yeah, I want to hold this.
I wish I could have each of Casey Race's projects. I love his work. I feel like it just speaks straight to the heart of the artist. There's a purity to them. I am a big fan of Alex from Generative Arts. He has a project coming up in plottables in a couple days, and I'm terrified that I'm not going to get one because there's only 50. But I love his work. I love what he's doing. And there's a couple other artists out there. Obviously I'm a huge fan of Harvey Pattern.co in Fontana. I'm on the curation board, and so I see a lot of projects and I vote on them and whatnot. And I can just say for certain when I saw Fontana, I thought, holy shit, this is a beautiful project.
Max, I have Max Payne. I never bought one. Everyone's been telling us about it for I don't know, 4 months, and I still yeah, that's a collector pain there.
Yeah, that was a cool project. And then also, just Bright Moments Mexico City was a huge opportunity for me to collect works from each of the artists there. And so just knowing that I have a work by Ana Lucia and Zach Lieberman and Iskra, that to me is like so valuable. Like, those are things I'll never ever sell. Like they're part of that experience and connecting with artists in a unique way. I don't care what they're worth, right? Like I'll never sell them. And like, there's I want more of that kind of experience. I want to like if I do collect more, like I want it to be like special and it's because I'm bonding with these people or I'm supporting them. And so that's the kind of collectorship I've done in the past. Like I love Jeff Davis's pieces. I'm actually kind of looking for a construction token right now. So I do have a Fontana, and I'm trying to. This might not be the best deal terms of a deal, but I might be willing to trade a Fontana for a construction token.
You heard it
Things
here
like
first,
that.
man. Here's your way to get a Fontana, people.
I know, but like it just things like that. I'm in it for the fun. I'm not in it for like the flippening. So yeah, that's my collecting experience.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, maybe I can ask you just one more question, and we can elaborate on this in the future. But you mentioned being on the curation board, so that's evolved. Is there anything you want to say about the future of Gen Art based on what you've been seeing over the past, let's call it year or two, like seeing what's coming through the curation board?
Well, the bar just keeps getting higher. I think like when a really good project comes through, you know, you can just feel it. Like you want to see more good projects, and there's a lot of projects that come through. Some of them are incredible and they don't make curated. Some of them are like kind of from my perspective, they're incredible, but they don't make curated. Some of them are curated, but maybe I'm like, well, I don't really like that project too much, right? But that's the beauty of it. It's like the curation board is literally like tons of people from completely different backgrounds. They have totally different perspectives. And so when they all align, something magical is about to happen. When there's kind of ifs and maybes and whatnot, then there's some really interesting things happening. But that's the cool part about it, is that like good stuff comes through and you never know if it's going to be voted on in the way that I want it to be voted on.
Love to be a fly on the wall just for some of these conversations, man. The curation board that Artblocks has put together is so dynamic and from such different walks of life. And I mean that as a compliment.
Oh yeah.
Most recent board got announced, my jaw dropped, and then obviously being tied to Von Mises and him sitting on the board, it's just I have nothing but admiration. I don't know how. Well, I do know how everybody gets there, but the love for Artblocks and what you guys are doing is insane. But to sit there and just listen, I'd love to like just be a fly on the wall one day, because that conversation's got to be absolutely like bananas.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's been some good conversations. And a lot of what we do is typed out like in like in forms and whatnot, and every single project that comes through gets like a paragraph written by each one of us, and so there's a lot of writing involved, and a lot of like trying to find the words to express how you feel about this thing, right? So it's definitely a really crazy experience, and it's fun, and it's just like I'm honored to be on a curation board with like such like incredible like art historians and collectors and whatnot. So yeah, it's definitely a cool part of.
Maybe in the future you just like send an NFT as your response instead of the paragraph. You'd be like, this one represents how I feel about it.
Yeah, that would be really cool. There's enough work out there to probably do that,
Yeah. No, I was gonna say, when the stars align, please DM us. Although I'm sure you guys have a whole bunch of confidentiality and
yeah,
whatnot
definitely.
that you go through for all that.
Yeah, we can't like really talk about much, because I mean, there's not really a lot of rules that are explicitly stated by Artblocks, but like we know that anything we say could easily be taken out of context and cause some kind of panic or activity that might not be what we want to induce publicly. So
Yeah. No, I hear you. And the space is crazy, and there's so much money flying around that it can be potentially harmful. So obviously just joking, but I am jealous, mostly just to have that experience of like, whoa, everyone, like this is something special, and being able to see it in a way that is I think harder for the general public. You just kind of see the price action, you're like, is this a pump and dump or what's going on? But this is why we have this podcast, and we chat with folks and have these various communities. So yeah, I want to get you out of here on time. Jared, do you have any final questions or anything for Daniel?
No questions. Just appreciate your time, man. I'm absolutely at a loss of words for the amount of attention and thought that you've put into your work, and what output just comes as a somewhat seamless, frictionless, and beautiful. To hear the depth and breadth of thought that went into it, I'm absolutely honored to be alongside you and P in order to have the opportunity to share this with everybody. Very humbled, very grateful for your attention and the devotion to go all in on this. It shows through your work, and I'm an eternal fanboy now, because you're the depth of thought and the artistic nuances that you've brought to it are absolutely incredible. So thank you for sharing and being so open and vulnerable with your approach.
Thank you. I'm humbled, but I'm just so happy that this is all happening and that I have this opportunity to be an artist right now in this way. I mean, it's just the best, like I'm so happy just living this life and doing all this stuff. It's such a joy, like it's just such a joy to be able to make art and have it be meaningful in some kind of way, and just to be able to participate as an artist, like as a voice that creates content, and it's just really special. So I really appreciate that, and thank you.
Yeah, and beyond that, like you are, you're a leader in this space, and I know that for some, maybe it wasn't planned, but I think people really look up to you, and a lot of, in addition to helping build this space, and I know you said it before, like Erick mostly did it, you were the artist, but you were there, and like the team always matters, and having a group with you, it's really important. So I appreciate everything that you've done for the space, and continue to push that culture. I think that one thing that you'll continue to be able to influence is the way that people interact with each other in this generative art world, and you can shape that in the direction that you think it should be, which is really exciting. Any parting thoughts or words for the audience?
Um,
If you don't have any, it's okay. I know I'm putting you on the spot.
well, just like if you're an artist out there, like just it's a good time to be an artist and put your best work out there. And I would love to connect with more artists. And I'm always happy to share any of my either gained experience or code tricks or color tricks or whatever. Like you treat me like an open book, and you can get any kind of info out of me you want in that regard. So if anybody out there's an artist listening, by all means, like I'd love to connect and whatnot. And just you guys, thanks for having me. Like it's a total honor to be on a podcast like this, and like it just shows like the power of connecting with people at events. Like I met you in Bright Moments, Mexico, right? And we just had like a casual conversation. I'm like telling me about the podcast. I'm like, that sounds so cool. And then here we are, like actually doing it. So like it's just such a cool experience, like how this is all coming together, and just moments like this. But yeah, just thanks for having me on here.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It was so nice to meet you and just be like, oh yeah, he's just like a normal dude, and we can just talk about stuff. And I think sometimes these in real life events help take the veil off of what in our space tends to be like. I don't like to use the word, but it does, like sometimes it's a bit of a hierarchy. It's like, oh wow, there's that famous artist, and I think most people don't feel that way when they meet in person, and that's fantastic. And I will say, you mentioned briefly when we met that, hey, maybe we'll have an artist retreat and we could use like some press or a podcast there. So I'm just putting it out there. I'm still open for that. Still open for that. And but obviously zero expectations.
You tell us the time and the place, and we'll be there. We'll bring mics and a full setup, whatever you need.
Jared will skip any birthday to be there.
Yeah.
Awesome deal.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we got to do a round two. There's more to talk about and more awesome collections you have. But for now, where is the best place for people to find you?
Find me on Twitter or in Discord. Those are where I hang out every day. And that's just, those are my main channels of communication. I post on Instagram, just random stuff here and there, but it's not really like the right environment for like sharing this kind of work. And Twitter's where it's at. Just DM me on there. If you're on Discord, you can send me a friend request or just post in my channel, and I'll, reach out to you or whatever. And you can just chat about anything, anytime.
Perfect. So we will put those in the show notes, and we've linked to everything else, including a Nature article on the 137.5 degrees golden angle for plants. So have that verified there. You hit it right on the nail on the head. And yes, for everybody tuning in, thanks for listening. Thank you so much, Daniel, for joining us. Like we had an amazing time. Honestly, we probably could talk more for like another hour, but I want to be respectful of your time, and love to see you again. Hopefully, we
sure
we figure out a time.
We will definitely connect again.
Yeah. So yeah, we're at collectors_XYZ for everyone listening. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Thank you for tuning into Collector's Corner. We really appreciate you taking the time to listen. If you like this episode and want to help us out, please subscribe and leave us a review on your podcasting platform of choice, like Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and follow us on YouTube. Please also follow us on Twitter for announcements as we expand to other social and content platforms. Our Twitter handle is at collectors_XYZ. We'd also love to hear any feedback you have, so please comment or reach out. We're always striving to be more useful and get better so we can help you in your collecting journey. The Collectors Corner team and their guests are not registered investment advisors. All views expressed on this podcast are personal opinions and are not specific inducements to make particular investments or investment strategies, and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. This show is solely for informational and entertainment purposes only. Before making any financial decisions, please consult a professional.